obviously it will take some time to reach to the decree and absorb everything that's in there. But one of the points that you made was the use of state funds to campaign, including finance and vehicles and whatnot. Could you clarify, since the Prime Minister has given his indication that he too will contest, he will become a politician, would he have to resign from government in order to start campaigning?
Well, if you read the Constitution, as you would know, you've covered other governments, the public office is not a minister or prime minister. But of course, if the prime minister goes and decides to take $23 million, like the agricultural scam, and start buying everybody, giving out money or using that to buy votes, then obviously that's an offense. But one holding office and one using state resources are two completely different things. Sorry, Matai?
Just a question on the count. How soon can we get the results out?
Well, we are hoping that once the polls close, you should start getting the results fairly soon thereafter. You will see when the polling lists are publicized that some polling stations may have, on average, from what we have been told by the Electoral Commission, on average, each polling station is about 500 or 600 voters. Some, of course, have quite a large amount. Some have a much smaller amount, but on average about 500 or 600. So if you take that as the benchmark, and as I think some of the media was told, that the Elections Office recently conducted a mock polling in which it took about, I think, 2.5 minutes to cast a vote. If the polls stay open till 6 p.m., if they start counting, say, by 7 p.m., you should start getting results flowing in a few hours' time thereafter. The ones that are closer, they could start giving the results fairly soon. And the decree does allow for the transmission of the results, by telephone, etc. But of course, they need to be backed up. This is why we've got unconfirmed. They need to be backed up by the actual records that needs to be tabulated by each polling station. They need to be sealed and then delivered. So, if there are polling stations along the Suvarnasori corridor, obviously, they can transmit that fairly quickly by vehicles, etc., coming through. But the idea is to have the results flowing in almost immediately, and hopefully, because you all would have had a public holiday, you could stay awake and, wait for the results. Sorry, Ricardo.
Yes, you mentioned 13 applications were received for the supervisor of elections, and none of the applicants met the criteria. So I presume that Mr. Sunny meets the criteria, or is he filling in because there's no other person who meets the criteria?
Sure. No, he does meet the criteria on a number of fronts. As the Australian and New Zealand consultants said to us, they're the ones, in fact, who recommended him to us. And they said in the absence of, for example, Laurie not being able to take the position, Laurie McGrath, who's about 63 years old or so, is traveling quite a bit, that he'd be the best person, backed by, of course, and this is why I've highlighted to you all those senior people who will be assisting him with the running of the Supervisor of Elections Office. He's been in that position now for nearly a year and has been very much involved with electronic voter registration, has been working with the consultants as provided for under the Constitution. Until the appointment of the Supervisor of Elections, the Permanent Secretary responsible for elections fills in that position. Yes. We had one candidate who applied who had been disciplined for various breaches of the Public Service Code, etc. So if that's an indication of the caliber of some of the people that applied, you would know.
Are you able to say now how many polling venues there could be?
Yeah, I understand. I don't know offhand. The Electoral Commission would be the best people to answer that. But I understand it's about 1,200 polling venues but I think the polling stations is close to 2,000. Yeah. So you would get the results from each polling station, not each polling venue, not the polling venue. So each polling station, so even though, like using Marist as an example, if they're going to use 5 classrooms, each one is compartmentalized. They have their own presiding officer, they have their own people, they have their own party scrutineers. So the results come from that classroom, which is one polling station. Because otherwise, it's easier to, conduct the actual scrutiny and all of that.
And the allocation of voters to voting stations, are they done alphabetically or how?
I cannot answer that. Again, that's not our job. It's the Electoral Commission that will decide in supervisor elections. But that would, I assume, be one of the ways of doing it. Because otherwise, the only way you could do it would be age, but I doubt they'll do that. But I would assume it will be alphabetically, because you can't distinguish between voters any other way. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, anyone who does not make it into the voting queue after 6 p.m. Has missed out?
Yes.
Is there any provision for the supervisor or whoever it may be to maybe give room if they see there are still people coming in?
No. They have to be in the queue. They have to be in the queue. Like I said, it's on average, on average, you have about 500 to 600 people per polling station. So really, it should be quite easy. If you take, for example, it takes about, say, 2.5 minutes for each voter to vote, and you multiply that, say, by 500, you've practically done it in half the day. But we're opening it so people have more time. Because it's also a public holiday, we would assume most people want to come and vote early on in the piece, and then go off and enjoy the rest of the day. But of course, there may be some people who may. In Fiji we tend to do things last minute. So again, the voter education will be focused on that. Please come and vote. Make sure that you're in the queue by 6, otherwise you won't be able to vote. And this is why the elections office is looking at having as many conveniently located polling stations as possible. So it makes it easier for people to vote.
Mr. AG, have you established the total cost of holding the elections in one day?
It'll come, obviously, as you know, the Papua New Guineans have already offered about $20 million. The Fijian government has made an allocation of $15 million. But of course, as others have decided to provide donations or grant assistance, like the New Zealand government has decided to fund all the polling cubicles. And they've got a very good system. It's actually hardened cardboard. So it's very easy to stack. You can actually fold it up like normal cardboard and put it away. And then you can put it up. So it's easier. They have ones that are waterproof. So if you take it out to the islands. So it's, I think your question is directed saying by a lot of people, I think, have this misconception that just because you have a polling on only one day, it's more expensive than 7 days. I mean, you do your mathematics. You keep a polling station open for 7 days, employ people for another additional 6 days, obviously it'll be more expensive. And then you have issues of security. This is done on one day, it's a lot more organized, a lot more precise, and in fact your costs are reduced.
When polling ends, how soon after that do you need to announce the confirmed results?
A lot of the confirmation will come once the supervisor of election or the electoral commission receives the actual documents, the sealed documents. Because what each polling station will be doing will be actually confirming it in writing. And all the party scrutineers will see it, and then they actually physically deliver that to the head office here, to the national tally room. But, of course, in the meantime, they can phone up and say, look, Party A got this many votes, or these are the candidates that got this many votes. So that's where the unconfirmed results will come in. Once the actual physically those documents are delivered, then they confirm it. So, the ones close by can be done, if they're counted within an hour or hour and a half, they physically send all the documents within 2 hours, they'll be all confirmed. There's talk about, and again, the Electoral Commission supervised elections will tell you this. There are some places will need to be serviced by helicopters. There's provision for that too, to collect, or they can collect it, for example, in Vanuatu in Lambasa, and they can collect it and then send it from there. So you could just have one pickup from Lambasa and bring it across. One would expect that the unconfirmed really should be very similar to the confirmed.
So when would a party be able to either concede or say they won?
Well, the sooner the better.
Can it be the same night, the following day?
Yeah, I think, if you are able to, for example, if you are able to get the results from Viti Levu, all of them in one night, and majority of the voters are on Viti Levu, and if they have, for example, if 540 votes have been cast, and a political party wins 280 votes, or 300 votes, then they've got majority of the votes. So I suppose then they can say, the others can concede. It will just simply be a question of how much more than 51% you get. So, but I think your question is pertinent because it's an open secret that majority of the voters are on Viti Levu. The bulk of the voters are between Nosori and Lami, in the urban centers in the Western Division, Nandi, Lautoka, Ba. The Eastern Division has very low numbers. They have about 25,000 voters in the Eastern Division. So if the results for the Viti Levu comes out and part of Vanua Levu, then whoever has got majority would be, could be safe to say they won. Sorry, then.
For leaders who are in the country,
Yeah.
in respect to this question, are we looking at results after
No.
the day after the vote was
No, the decree actually provides quite specifically for that. So, for example, if you're going to have postal ballots, the postal ballots or votes must come in
6 p.m.
by 6 p.m. of that day. But all the postal ballots will be kept in the head office. They have their own box. It'll all be sealed, double seal and all of that. Then, of course, you have the votes that are cast on pre-polling overseas. So, for example, if we have people taking a ballot box and going to Golan Heights to get the votes of the soldiers, get the votes of people who may be living in UK, or West Coast, or of North America or Australia, that could be done 1 or 2 weeks before. So all of that will then come in and sit in the head office. And again, each ballot paper, even in that instance, is sealed. They're not you don't sort of just vote and put it in the box. That even is sealed. And those seals need to be opened when the counting actually starts. So they are quarantined, if you like, from the rest of the votes. And that's a common practice, like, for example, last year when you had the Australian elections, you had Australians, for example, going and voting in Hong Kong, 2 days before, 1 week before, whatever the case was, and then they bring it in and they count it in Australia.
On section 124, the Attorney General required officially to or what would be the grounds for it?
I will hand you over to the man who's done it, I think. Oh, I broke something.
Let me just have a look at that section, please.
Wonderful.
In all civil proceedings, the Attorney General, as the representative of the state, has a right to intervene in proceedings. It is not just election petitions. Where public interest is involved, the Attorney General represents the interest of the state, represents the public interest. So, based on that, the Attorney General has, not just in this decree, but in many other laws, the authority and the jurisdiction to intervene in proceedings and to assist the court as the legal head of the state, to assist the court in making a decision.
Does that answer your question? What is your question? She has a underlying question beneath that, which he's not asking.
Just explaining, what would be grounds for dispute of an election?
The grounds for dispute is actually in a different section, and that is contained if you look at section part 5, which provides for petitions. So petition is essentially a challenge in court of the results of the election.
Maybe give an example as to what happened previously.
Yes. So in 2006, I think there was a constituency where there was a dispute about 11 or 9 votes.
11 years ago.
Yes. So in that seat, a recount was in fact requested, and normally one would think that a recount would in fact be called or it would be conducted. But in this case, if I recall correctly, no recount was done.
The returning officer refused to do a recount.
Yes. So the candidate who lost filed a petition in court challenging the declaration of results for that constituency. So in this case, for example, a voter has a right, a candidate has a right, or even a political party has a right to go to court to challenge, to say there was substantial procedural impropriety with respect to the elections, and of course it will be for the judge to decide whether that impropriety is such that would necessitate the granting of orders which may include recounts or repolling as well. Yes, and that's where the Attorney General really comes in to protect the state interest. Now, this is not a section that we have included here just like that. This is a section that was there in the 1998 Electoral Act. It was there in the one before that. And in fact, I think it has been with us ever since we've been having elections since the independence. The right of the Attorney General as the head of the legal arm of the state to intervene in court proceedings, essentially to assist the court in making a decision.
Just a clarification on the information that will be provided to political parties. You said they at present have the hard copies of the voter roll. Will that, you also mentioned, alluded to privacy issues. So I mean to understand that from now on you just be giving them the versions with
Name, ID number, and the polling station. Yeah.
So are they going to get that from now on, or will they still continue to get the hard copy?
No, they will get, what's been given has been given. You see, in some countries, unfortunately, political parties sell that information to commercial companies. It's very valuable. If you're a company that wants to market to young people, you'll know exactly how many young people live in one area. People have actually sold it.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So wasn't that something that your office would have thought about before? Because
Well,
there's a lot of information there.
yeah.
I mean, people who want to commit fraud, voter identity theft.
Well, no, not voter identity. It's got nothing to do with voter identity.
Well, basically you can reconstruct an identity if you look similar to a person. So,
Yeah, I think that's kind of stretching it a bit too far. But I think what is critical is the point that your personal information is being given to a third party. That's to do with privacy. Now, in terms of constructing a voter theft or identity theft, the elections office obviously has your fingerprint. So that's one of the key markers. Generally, I don't think that level of sophistication has taken place in Fiji where you can go and forge my fingerprint. But I think the point there is, yes, I mean, in hindsight, by giving that type of information to the political parties at that point, in hindsight is obviously a fantastic thing, but it probably should not have been given. But the reality is that it has been given, and we are now trying to correct the situation. Of course, at that time, when we gave it out, everybody thought it was a wonderful idea. Most of the journalists thought it was a good idea too. But it was unprecedented. It's never been done before. In fact, to all the international agencies we've shown, they all thought it was a fantastic thing. But now we've, of course, given some of the issues that have been raised. We've said the political parties, as far as they're concerned, because they're interested in the voters. the analysis, whatever. So it's right down to the polling station. So on average of 500-600 people, they know exactly how many people there are. Of course, by names, you can generally determine the gender too, whatever analysis you want to carry out. But with the information that will be given out by the elections office will be the name, the polling station, and the ID number. As I said, that you'll find that nearly every step of the way, any information that pertains to voters or venues or polling stations, it must be all published. In 2006, the preferences, as you know, people needed to know the preferences of the political parties. The supervisor of elections then decided to publish in the Daily Post, with a circulation of I think 400, if that. So that was just to meet, because the law at that time said to publish in a daily newspaper. The law over here now says must publish in all media, basically, all daily newspapers. So Fijian, Fiji Times, radio stations, etc. Wherever it's radio stations, you can do it. If you can do it in radio stations, but the idea would be to do it. Of course, now you've got other mediums, websites, Facebook pages, etc. Okay? Very good. Naka? Thank you. If you want to ask something privately, you can.